Coming up in this episode of PWD Allies podcast.
Even our own families that knew that we were a couple, there was still that kind of prevailing thing. Well, okay, they're a couple, but they're only like kissing and hugging and stuff. They're not doing anything else.
PWD Allies, the best disability podcast in Canada. Starring your hosts, Brent Frayne. And as always, his producer and editor, Neil Matheson.
Today's podcast, we're going to be talking about caution tape love heart. And to my editor, Neil, what is caution tape love heart?
I brought a prop with me today, Brent. This is my memoir, this book that I wrote. It was back in 2009. I published it, self-published it, Daddy Bent Legs. You can actually, if you go to my website, daddybentlegs.com, if you go to the media tab on daddybentlegs.com, people can download a PDF version of this for free now. Oh, wow. And if you want to support me, you can throw me a couple bucks. Why we're doing this episode today, Brent, is that when you talk about disability or disability and relationships, disability and intimacy, or disability and desirability, disability and parenting, disability and family planning, all of those things seem to be off base. And that's why we have this. You know, you started the show saying caution tape love heart, and I put the thumbnail with, you know, this heart with a whole bunch of caution tape around it, because it's like, well, you know, that's out of bounds. If you're a person with a disability, that's out of bounds. You're not supposed to like fall in love with somebody. You're not supposed to want to have sex with somebody. You're supposed to be asexual. You're not supposed to want to be a parent. You're not supposed to want these things, right?
Yeah, it's almost like that.
Yeah, like this book, I have to say, full disclosure, this book is more about my journey leading up to, like, right up to becoming a father. So it goes all the way up to when Jake was 1 year old. And then it ends there. So there's not much of me actually being a father in the book. It's about my journey to become a father, to the journey to fatherhood, or the journey to parenthood, right? And then I actually did a part 2 of this called Daddy Bent Legs 2, like TOO. And it is an unofficial part 2. There is no hard copy of that one. I mean, people that have been with this podcast for a while will know, my story and how my first wife passed away. She had arthrogryposis, so she was born with a fairly severe disability. You know, the arthrogryposis means that you don't have the joint flexibility. She was in a motorized wheelchair basically her whole life. She couldn't do toileting by herself. She had trouble. She had to help with getting dressed and with grooming and stuff like that. So, like I said, it was a fairly significant disability. But having said that, in all seriousness, she was extremely able. She was a school teacher for 17 years, an elementary school teacher for 17 years. And I tell you, I had the privilege to watch her teach a number of times. I would go to her classroom. I mean, I probably wasn't supposed to be there a lot of the time, but because I was her husband, I guess, you know, the school allowed it, and I got to sit in on her classroom quite a few times. To be able to watch her teach and just to see the level of control that she had in the classroom, it wasn't like this overbearing control. There was a love and respect there for her students. Like it was a mutual love and respect. You know, she was a very small woman. She was like 4'10" in this wheelchair. But I mean, she would roll into the room I like to say, walk into the room, but she would roll into any room, and immediate respect, and full control of the classroom, and that is why when we talked about, or she said, I really want to try to have kids, or at least we'll try to have at least a first child. I was fine with that because I already knew that I could tell that she was fully capable, because I'd seen her in action of being fully in control of a classroom. And that's another thing of like, one thing I was worried about before, we got pregnant, and I'm thinking to myself, like, how am I going to handle a kid that's running around like crazy when they're like 1 and 2 and 3, no. How will that be a thing? But like I said, Ilana was so good. Like, one thing that people don't realize, if you're, I think the able-bodied crowd, or they don't realize how much things that you have to control when you have a disability. Like, you have to plan more. Like, you have to overplan. And so Ilana, even before she became a mom and a parent, she was so well versed in having to overplan her whole life anyway already, because she had, like I said, she already had 10 years of experience dealing with carrieds 24/7 all the time. And so this whole idea of having to really overplan and direct people. She had a team of like 5 or 6 people all the time, and to be able to like navigate that well, and to people manage, and to know what she needed for herself, and then when she became a parent, to be able to navigate what she needed and what Jake needed, and all of that. I mean, it's very, like, there's no, like, how you can say, or I can say, and maybe it's unfair, but I can say that, for an able-bodied parent, maybe they take cheat codes or shortcuts sometimes. If there's a bad situation, an able-bodied parent can just scoop up the child, for example, and if you scoop up the child really fast and get them out of a situation. But of course, like, I couldn't just go to Jake and scoop him up. Like, I can't do that. I have crutches, or I did have crutches, I can't just go over him and scoop him off the floor, and neither could my wife, right? So knowing that, we all already knew that we had to be able to use our voice and direct using our voice, and have Jake always respect our voice. And he got really good at it. And he was never the type of child that like, there was never like he never had a bunch of outbursts, or he never had a bunch of tantrums, or like, he was always like well under control. And it's not that we were like overbearing. He just got really good at respecting our voices. And if we said, Jake, don't do that, he would stop and actually listen to us. And so it worked. It worked for us because we were both like on the same page, using our voices to direct him, and it worked. And yes, there were times, of course, when the carried would come in and direct as well, of course, because they were the hands. When I couldn't be the hands to scoop or whatever, the carrieds were the hands. But it's still, the point being is that you still have to find a way to compensate for not having a certain ability. You have to kind of start thinking outside the box.
Absolutely.
Again, I think governments and that, or society in general, thinks, well, as I said, like, they think, well, of course, family planning and parenting and wanting to have sex or intimacy or desirability with another disabled person, that's kind of weird, or or taboo or off limits. And I remember when we went to Ilana's parents and they had there was Ilana's niece was there, and Ilana's niece, she was actually a very young mother. I think she got pregnant when she was 17 or something. And anyway, she was there with her kids at the time. Then we announced that Ilana was pregnant, and this niece, like I said, that she already had kids. We said Ilana's pregnant, and the jaws dropped, and and they're like, they couldn't believe it, and the niece says, well, like, she's like, how? Like, that was her response of, well, how did you get pregnant? And then so then, you know, kind of Ilana was very blunt, and she says, well, you know, kind of the penis goes into the vagina, but then even when she said that, it was like, well, but how? You know, still.
Oh my God.
And that's what I mean. It's just like, even our own families that knew that we were a couple, there was still that kind of prevailing thing. Well, okay, they're a couple, but they're only like kissing and hugging and stuff. They're not doing anything else, you know. Like this idea that we're asexual, and that why would you even want to try to have a child, because, you know, that's going to be way too difficult, you know. And that's another thing, is like, because of my disability, and I mean, you can say the same thing for yourself, Brent, is that if you're born with a disability, you know what your limitations are. Like, you just know, because you're living with it every day. You're
Lived experience, yeah.
You're living with your limitations every day. So I'm not gonna lie to myself and say I can do something. If I know I can't do something, I'm not gonna lie to myself and say I can do it, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So when we first started planning to have a child, it wasn't something we just thought, well, let's try it. Let's just try and like just throw something up against the wall and see if it sticks. You can't have that attitude. You have to really be honest with yourself and say, can I do this? Am I physically capable of doing this? And after talking about it a lot, we were like, yes, we can. Yes, we can do this. And like I said, like to start off the show, I knew that Ilana was capable because I'd seen her in action. I'd already know that, like I said, she'd walk into a room and immediate control of any situation. Like, I'm telling you, if this condo was burning down, or if I was on the Titanic, I would want to be with Ilana to get off the boat of the Titanic. Like, I would want to be with her because I would know that I would get off the boat safely, or I would get out of this burning building safely if I was with her, because she's in complete control all the time. And one of the things I wanted to really touch on too is, like I said, when we first announced that Ilana was pregnant, her side of the family, the mouth dropped, but it was also the same with my parents. And I'm not going to throw my parents under the bus, but I have to say that my parents' take on the whole pregnancy thing, they were shocked as well. And, you know, when I first married Ilana, you know, we were together for almost 5 years, even before we had Jake. And right when we first got married, my mom kind of brought me aside and she said, well, now that you're married, and this was very early on in the marriage, like within like a month or something of it, she pulled me aside and she says, well, you know, now that you're married to Ilana, I think you should get a vasectomy. And I said, a vasectomy? What do you mean? And she says, well, I really don't think that you and Ilana should ever consider like being parents, and I wouldn't want to see a mistake like that happen. And I have to again, I understand parents wanting to be protective. I get it. But it really surprised me. Again, it really surprised me that to hear that it wasn't just my mom saying. I knew that my dad felt the same way, and it was the first time I was kind of hearing that, because my whole life, both my parents have always said, like, do whatever you want, Neil. Like, the world's your oyster. And then, and they were supportive of when I hooked up with Ilana. They were excited about it, and I thought, well, this is good. That they were happy that I found somebody, and so when I found out that they didn't really think that I should become a parent, or that it was a dangerous pursuit to become a parent, I should get a vasectomy, or that Ilana should get a hysterectomy or something like that. And I pushed back on it hard. I said, you do realize that Ilana really wants. I already knew that she really wanted kids, because, and this, and I think people that have watched the podcast for a few years now know that, just like you were, Brent, just like you were adopted, my first wife was adopted as well. And when she had an opportunity to meet up with her birth mom, and it was actually only a year before I actually met Ilana, so she was around 25 at the time. And again, this was a year before I even met Ilana, that Ilana had met her mom. And her mom had said, if I had known that you were going to be born disabled, I would have had a abortion.
Oh.
And Ilana said, well, surely you don't mean that. And her birth mom said, no, I do. That was crushing to Ilana to hear that. That would almost set a fire in her even more, that I want to have a child to give out that love that I never got from my own birth mom. And of course, like her adopted parents were great. I mean, her dad passed away a year. Ilana's dad, I'm talking about. Her adopted dad passed away about a year and a bit before Ilana did. Like, I still have a really good relationship with my mother-in-law, though. Like, she's fabulous. So Ilana grew up with very loving parents. Like, both of her parents, like adoptive parents, were like, they're amazing people, right? It wasn't that Ilana didn't feel the love that way, but there's still that kind of hole in the heart of, like, that I was unloved by my own flesh and blood. And so there was a really burning desire, like, I really want to have a child to, like, give out that love, right? And so just to hear that my parents were not supportive of it was, like I said, very puzzling to me. I didn't realize that was going to be their attitude. But then the other part of it is too, like, when we were doing all of this, like, we were just kind of living our lives. We weren't thinking that we were doing anything special. Like, I mean, yeah, of course, having a child is a special thing. Don't get me wrong, but we didn't think we were doing anything like cutting edge, I should say, or like, like mind blowing, like way out there. Like, we're gonna have a child. Like, that's mind blowing. Like, I mean, we just wanted to do something that everybody else, or not everybody, but a lot of people want to get married and have a family, right? And that's just something that we wanted to do. So we were just kind of doing the normal thing. So it was interesting when we were looking into all this thing about family planning. Ilana started to, like, do very exhaustive research on the web and internet. She was thinking, well, how many other disabled parents are there? Like, I know there are other disabled parents. Maybe there's one parent that's married to an able-bodied person, so you have one of the two parents who's got a disability and the other one doesn't, or something. So there's probably lots of those. But Ilana wanted to try to find if there was any examples of two people with a disability being a couple wanting to become parents. She looked into it, and we could not find one example anywhere in BC other than us, other than her and I, in all of British Columbia, of two people with a disability wanting to become parents, and having a child. there was no other example. We couldn't find anything. Like and Lana was very good at researching. So if she couldn't find it, it means that it didn't exist. And then she
a needle in a haystack. Eh?
Yeah, and then she looked kind of elsewhere, like outside of BC, and even doing that, she only found like, I think it was like 2 or 3 instances of that in all of Canada. I think there was like 1 or 2 in Ontario, and that was it, kind of thing. And it's
that's what I meant, like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
Like
and again, like we weren't trying to push the envelope or do anything like that was like weird or outlandish. Like we just wanted to have a child. But again, like when we were doing it, we kind of realized, well, like maybe we are kind of bleeding edge, because when we started to plan it, we had a medical team at the Surrey Memorial Hospital here, and I have to say they were wonderful. They assembled a whole team for us. You got to remember that Surrey Memorial Hospital has been around since 1959 is when it was first opened.
I was gonna say they've been around a long time.
1959 is when they first opened, and we were
way before I was born.
Yeah, and Jake was born in 2008. They told us point blank. They said, we have never done a high risk pregnancy like this ever before in this hospital. We have never had to deal with this at all. And it's like, and I was thinking to myself, oh, like really? Like you've never had like a situation of a disabled mom delivering like a high risk pregnancy like this? And they're like, no, we've never done this.
Wow.
And so one of the things that they did for us, which was great, is instead of putting Ilana on a typical maternity ward where most mothers are, they put us up in the ICU, the intensive care unit, kind of the end of life unit. And the reason why they did that is they said, well, we have more sophisticated equipment up there. We have more sophisticated staff and well-trained staff up there, and also more available staff. They said, we'd rather have you up on a floor where there's going to be lots of staff that are always checking on you all the time. We want that. So
more dedicated staff.
Yeah, and it was cool, because when Jake was actually born, I remember it must have been really cool for the nurses. They told us after. They actually told us after too. They told us it was cool for them, because you have to remember, if you're on the ICU floor, like all these nurses that were on the ICU floor, they're used to like end of life scenarios, right? Of people that are either old or dying or close to death in a lot of cases. And here we were with this new baby. So every time they would come to our room, they were like, so many like big smiles, like, again, like we weren't trying to do anything that was bleeding edge or cutting edge. But then when you step back with hindsight, a bit of hindsight, you realize actually we were kind of bleeding edge and cutting edge. But it's unfortunate that it has to be considered that. I think that's the whole point of this podcast. We can talk about societal views on things, like the prevailing attitudes of the government too. Like with the recent they promised they were going to remove the spousal cap here in BC. You had Sheila Malcolmson saying, we're going to remove the spousal cap for people with disabilities that are married, that have spouses. We're not going to punish you anymore. That was the promise, right? We're not going to punish you financially anymore. That is what Sheila Malcolmson promised. And I don't want to throw Sheila Malcolmson under the bus. Like, she's the current Minister of Social Development here in BC. I do respect her. I know she's trying hard. She's trying hard in her role as minister. But the fact of the matter is it was advertised, and she promised that, okay, we're going to remove, that was her words, we're going to remove the spousal cap. But they did not do that. They did not do that. And I feel really bad for you and Sonia because
we were right there.
Because you were trotted out as kind of trophies of like, here's a couple of trophy people with disabilities. We're going to remove the spousal cap, but in actual fact, it wasn't a removal. It was like a reinstatement of like about $50 each. Everybody thought, and again, we're talking about the disability community as a whole, that okay, they're finally going to respect autonomy.
Right.
They're finally going to respect this idea that people with disabilities, if they're allowed to have love too, they're allowed to have a relationship too without penalty. This idea that they're finally going to respect autonomy and we're not going to get punished for wanting to love somebody. We're not going to get punished for that. And it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. It felt like, to me, it felt very similar to the whole Canada Disability Benefit rollout, right? The CDB, where it was like this whole bait and switch. It was like, we're going to promise this, but then we're going to pull the tablecloth out and surprise, we're not really going to do that. Let's bring this in back for a landing and bring this back to the caution tape love heart. On the thumbnail, the caution tape love heart, somehow that love and relationships and desirability, all that is off limits for somebody like for people with disabilities, right?
And I guess the moral of the story is about love and autonomy and about respect and dignity. It's all of the above. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. Please subscribe, like, and share. As always, stay tuned to our next podcast. Have a great day.